Refresh. One up.
What up, folks?
One down.
Welcome back to another episode of the Pop Culture Punks podcast, where we bring pop culture to the pit. This week, we'll be picking apart our creative selves to answer some questions from a longtime listener, who we will reveal later. What is creativity? What do we love about the creative things we do? And what got us into the world of creative pursuit?
Good questions.
Before we dive into that, what have you been up to this week, my boy?
I have been up to not too much, scrolling the Twitters, so I've got a few things on our updates that I thought were of note. So one was Jimmy Wong, which we just had to reset because we couldn't figure out what character he played. So Jimmy Wong, who I loved as Fred in Freddie Wong, his brother's series, Video Game High School, which was on YouTube and then was on Netflix for a while, which is really cool. So I was a huge Freddie Wong fan growing up, like just seeing his like short skits where they do their own special effects and everything, and then getting to see him actually get to like make and produce a show that was actually pretty freaking awesome.
Love Video Game High School.
So Jimmy Wong, his brother, is playing Ling, who is one of the three characters in Mulan. It's like Ling, Yao, and Jinpo, and so he's playing Ling, who's one of the three, and he's playing that character in the live action thing, or live action recreation of Mulan, which I thought was pretty cool. So I'm excited for him because that's a pretty big deal to get a
big role like that.
Go from like your brother's YouTube series to like
a live action
full on Disney film.
Yeah,
that's freaking cool.
That's big.
So there's that. Also, classic EA news. So I don't know if you saw this.
Oh, I did. Yeah.
Patrick Soderlund, I think is how you pronounce it. So he's like some big wig at EA. I don't know. Apparently
he was the CEO, wasn't he?
I don't think he was a CEO. I think he was the major head of one division of EA. But all I know is I was cracking up because I saw some news coverage where EA wanted to keep him so bad that they gave him a 20 mil advance or something in like shares or whatever, and it was approved by the board and everything. And then dude just up and leaves. Like just straight up, just took his mill and walked. $20 million they tried to pay him to stay, and he was like, that's enticing.
I think they did pay him $20 million like last year to stay already.
So this might have been
this
another
is like
one.
A year later.
An additional.
Then he left, yeah.
Yeah, so dude, so help me, if I hear EA say one freaking thing about like, oh, we're trying to justify microtransactions because we need the money, like, then maybe don't pay your D-bag CEOs $20 million just to hang around. Like, gosh, that's
maybe they'll get someone who's better. I feel like that guy was never good at presenting at like E3 and stuff.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
No one's ever gonna be. I feel like the majority of those folks just don't understand that they're talking to a bunch of like nerds, and so they're always like so professional and like
and we're just like
crisp.
Get on with the show, man.
It's like,
show
dude,
us the
just
game.
like it's like all you need to do is you don't need to give it. It's like they're doing too much salesman, too much CEO salesman stuff where they're like, we're here to show you all these things that you as gamers, the people that we live for, we're here to show you stuff. Show us Battlefront, like that's all it is. So
apparently he was the executive vice president of EA, and then he got promoted to chief design officer of EA, and he was previously the CEO of DICE.
Okay,
so he was big in creating the Battlefield series.
Yeah,
back in the day, I think.
So I just thought it was classic that, of course, the company that is the most money hungry, as it seems, in the public eye, is also the company chucking around 20 mil every other year for their people to stay. And they're also the company that tends to be a little whiny when it comes about needing DLC and microtransactions to pay for everything. Huh.
Friggin' A.
Well, fascinating.
Well, how do you do?
Not very well, because I left. So there's that. What else we got in the news? So, and then new Disturbed single. It's all you metalheads out
Good
there.
Stuff.
Are You Ready is their new, I think they classified it as a ballad, so they Disturbed had a Twitter poll where they had all the fans like write in.
That.
Yeah, so they asked for like ballads.
There was two options. It was ballad or jam or something like that. And I voted for ballad, which was losing at the time.
Yeah, so I think ballad won. Because that was considered their ballad, I think. Which I love it because they released a song on Twitter and everyone's like, man, you want your band to like evolve and everything, but like this is bad. This is just like radio, Sirius XM radio pop, and it's like, stop. I just can't. I can't deal with that. That drives me absolutely bananas. It's just like,
you gotta stay away from the Twitter comments,
dude. It's just like. But then the funny thing is everyone's like, it's not heavy enough. And everyone's like, that was their ballad. So rest of the album probably will be a little kickier.
Yep.
Drop kick you in the eardrums.
I'm excited for it.
But,
it's October,
I'm super
right?
stoked. Yeah, October 19th, which is a Friday. So, I mean, I'm super. They're probably number one band of all time for me.
Really?
But I think that's also because they were one of my gateway bands into the metal. Like I heard, can't remember where I heard it first. I think I was like looking up music on YouTube, and then somehow I saw 10,000 Fists, and that was like, I saw that, and then Land of Confusion, which we just watched the music video for, which is that classic early 2000s new metal music video. It's so good.
Good.
But anyway, I'm really excited. I've loved everything that they've put out. There's going to be some quality jams. It's going to be great. And the concept of the album, from what Draiman said in some interviews, is that it's going to focus on like social media and how like technology is like ruining us. And so they've had some good songs like that. Whenever they are like attacking something, like they just
bring it
they
out.
go hard. So it's going to be good. It's going to be real good. So I'm excited. And speaking of metal, I was listening to, shout out to the Review podcast. They're an awesome, I think one of the guys from Imperius,
Troy,
I think it's Troy.
does it, yeah.
I was listening to their Mission Impossible episode, and they were joking around, and I was cracking up. So they were talking about, so one of them made an offhanded comment about Mamma Mia 2 is actually doing better than the first one, which is not the importance of this situation. The importance is we have all these movies out there, like High School Musical, Pitch Perfect, Mamma Mia. Where is the Metalhead musical? Like, I want a hardcore screamo. Like,
I think you'd have to convince metalheads that to watch a musical.
I think that would be the irony. Is it's like they don't. It's like we don't want this. It's like exactly. So that's why we made it. But I was imagining a bunch of people just like running around, and then like when a song kicks in, just like a drop C, just like, you know what this makes me feel? It's just like,
it would be even funnier if you use the same types of people from regular musicals, but like all of the songs were just metal songs.
That would
be
like see, I wasn't even envisioning that. I was envisioning like
metalheads,
like Goth the musical.
Okay.
Basically,
I feel like, yeah, I guess they would be two different movies. One of them would be like a comedy,
because it'd be
normal
like
people to like jam out to. Like,
oh boy,
metal. Like
I sure hope I get
something.
cast for the part.
It's been my dream.
That'd be amazing. Oh my gosh. And the other one, so then the reverse I thought of that would be hilarious, is like an actual like metal story where it was like, I hate everything, and then just going from there.
That'd be great.
If anyone writes it or anyone comes up with it, please make it so. I'd watch that.
I would
Not
watch it
because
too.
I'm that into like seeing the things I loved tarnished by another thing I hate, but because I think it'd be freaking funny and ironic.
I'd do it. I'd watch it.
Is that irony? That's not irony.
It depends which version. It's kind of irony because metalheads don't like musicals.
That's true.
So it's ironic in some ways, depending on who
Whatever.
you are looking at it.
Whatever.
So.
I don't care.
Whatever.
Anyway.
I don't know.
Last thing was been jamming some OG Thrice. Been loving it.
Which
really
album?
loving
Do you
it.
know which album?
I listened through the Ambulance and the
Artist in the Ambulance.
Artist in the Ambulance.
That's one of my favorites.
And then I was listening to a couple of Dustin's solo albums too. So
Good
and
stuff.
I've just been like listening to. Had a bunch of like product photos to pound through.
Yeah,
So
his solo stuff's good. He's got some worship stuff too, which is good.
yeah. So really digging it. It has that tinge of like early 2000s edge that I love. Like that's probably my favorite other than the 80s. I would say like the early 2000s in terms of like rock and metal, and you know, you had like 3 Days Grace back in their time when Adam was still there, and like Thrice, Disturbed was just, you know, killing it with all their stuff.
Yeah, I feel like Thrice is one of those bands that like has never been tied down to their genre. Like
Sure.
if you listen to all their albums, like their first
Pretty different.
couple albums are pretty like thrashy and like post-hardcore, and then Artist in the Ambulance is still like that post-hardcore, but like not in the same way that like Under Oath is, or trying to think of other post-hardcore bands, like
Sure.
basically emo bands.
Yeah.
And they kind of like kept going down like the rock route, and then you get to Vehesu, which is really good, and then they almost get into like bluesy rock metal. It's like hard. They're hard to pin down because they're like always evolving and changing. Which
Yeah, like I know
appreciate.
their most recent stuff I've been listening to it's got that like I don't know what the effect is or the technical term, but what it almost kind of sounds like distant and like tin canny, where it's kind of like old timey radio in a way, but it's like grindy.
I like that.
It's kind of got like a grindy filter. So they have a lot of stuff like that, but then they have still like the chug of the guitars and stuff. So it's jamming time.
Yeah. Love Thrice. That everything?
Yes.
That's all.
Yeah.
I saw
I saw your tweet about Lord of the Rings Extended Edition.
Yeah.
Return of the King or Fellowship?
I will eventually see all three in theaters. I
Okay.
bought tickets for all three, but last night was the first one.
Okay.
And then
Got
next
it.
Wednesday I'll see the second one, and then the Wednesday after that I'll see the third one.
Nice.
So basically
3
4 hours. I think the third one's like 4 hours and 20 minutes or something.
Got it.
So
That's a lot of Mountain Dew.
it was, yeah.
It
So yeah, I
was.
saw that last night. It was really good, really fun to see in theaters.
Because I don't know that we were. I mean, I had friends who did see them in theaters, but I didn't, and I don't remember.
Think I did.
The only versions I've ever seen are the director's cut, and they were, or the extended edition, I guess, and those were all at home.
Yeah, I've seen all of them like 2 or 3 times now. Because I back in the day I watched all 3 with my brothers, I think.
Nice.
And then Evan and I watched the first 2 like 2 years ago or last year or something, just because I told her she had to watch them. And then we never got to the third one. And then I watched the third one extended cut by myself, and that was the first time I've actually ever felt like I had to push through a movie because it was so long. But yeah, I think the first one was really fun to see in theaters with all the battle sequences and stuff. Like
Sure.
It just shows you how like epic and grand it is on a different level. So I really enjoyed that, and I'll be seeing the next 2. So
Sweet.
Also, I'm probably gonna buy tickets because in October they're having Studio Ghibli Fest, and I might buy tickets to see Spirited Away in the theaters.
Ooh,
So
nice.
it's like $12.50, but I'm getting $6 in points for buying these 2 tickets.
Oh, interesting.
So next week I'm gonna buy a ticket probably for that because
Dope.
I don't know, it's fun. It's fun watching these older movies in theaters and getting to experience it in a different way. So
For sure.
yeah, that was fun. A lot of Mountain Dew though.
Oh, dude, I can't like. Did you get like the?
I got the big one and I
honker?
drank 2 of
Yeah.
them, I think.
Dude,
And I had to go to the bathroom twice. So which isn't terrible. It's like once per movie if you consider it 2 movies.
I've always found it interesting. Like, I've gone to a good amount of movies with you recently.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you are an unashamed, like, I gotta pee, I gotta go. I'm getting
Yeah.
up and I'm walking out. I will hold it until there's liquid leaking out of my face. Like, I am not leaving the movie.
out of.
No.
I was like, you pee your
No,
pants.
no. I'm not. I'm strong. I'm a strong man
can
in every
hold it
sense of
in.
the word. No, I've got the fortitude, but I'm just saying, if my body's like, look, bro, this has got to go somewhere. Like,
I think like if I didn't have the Mountain Dew, then I could make it through the whole movie. But because I chug like 64 ounces of Mountain Dew, then like
you're like,
it like
ain't
gets
no
to the point
way.
where I can't enjoy the movie anymore. I'm like, oh,
'Cause
frick,
you-
if I don't
you're
go,
gonna-
this is the whole rest of the movie's shot.
'cause
So
you're-
I might as well
yeah.
miss 10 minutes than like an hour. So then I get up and go. But
Interesting.
it always sucks because the way our Marcus is set up, like if you get in theater 1 through 3 to the right, you have to walk all the way around, past the concessions, all the way around the corner to get to the bathroom. So it like takes that's where the movie was. So
Yep.
twice I had to like
sure.
walk all the way around, and then but if you get the one way down, like the big theater, that's like right
got
across
its
the
own.
bathroom. So yeah.
You got to play your cards right.
I used to be the guy who would hold it, but now I'm just like, I don't really feel like having to pee the whole time.
Sure.
I
think
just
I'm
get
just
like
I
antsy.
like. Yeah, I've
So-
learned to. I tend to not drink. Like, if I'm getting concessions, I never get like a soda or
Really?
any kind of liquid. Like pretzel bites, some dots. That's it.
Oh,
I
so
don't.
good.
I definitely don't do liquids.
feel like
'cause I don't like peeing. In the
I'm like the
middle of movie.
opposite. The thing I have to get when I go to the movies is soda.
Soda.
I've tried to make it a habit of just getting like a smaller or medium now, But because this movie was 4 hours long, I was like, I
gotta
I'm
double
getting
up.
the big boy.
So I'm going regular.
So
Nice.
yeah, it was fun. It was a good experience.
Sweet.
I'm still reading through Invincible, trying to get through the next series of comics so I can watch the second video of Imperious Rex, which is taking more time because there's tons of. I just got a whole another stack of like 8 inches tall of comics from the library. So,
Nice.
I've been on a Jeff Lemire kick. He's a comic writer. He's super interesting. It's like a lot of his comics focus on like small town type mentality and like because he grew up in Canada in a small town. And it's interesting because I relate to a lot of like the family dynamics and the friend dynamics and the small town sort of dynamics. And he like kind of intertwines that with like weird supernaturally type stuff. It's like surreal kind of. So, and he's got sci-fi stuff and superhero stuff. He kind of just does like everything. So
Nice.
I've been on a huge kick of his.
Is he artist and writer or just writer?
He does both. He's got a lot of comics. His indie comics when he first started out was him writing and drawing. I like his art style. It's different. It's like not super detailed, and it's just like. But when you see it, you're like, "That's Jeff Lemire." Like you know it's his.
Interesting. Cool.
Which I appreciate. I found that I like a lot of comics when the art isn't like super realistic. It's more like you can tell.
A specific
and that's
person.
how Hellboy is too. A lot
Cool.
of the time, like his style is just that way. So
Nice.
yeah, it's crazy. Like he's written stuff for Marvel. He's written stuff for DC. A lot of his stuff now is on Image, and he's done stuff for Vertigo, and so he's been all over the board. And like, it's crazy how much he's got.
Man.
Like if all I read was his comics, I'd probably be set for like a year.
That's
because he's just got so
ridiculous.
much.
Yeah,
He's
so
done
much stuff.
Moon Knight.
Ooh.
So I think he did
I'll
the
have to
run before
check.
the one you were.
Oh,
were
okay.
doing.
Yeah, I'll have to
So-
check because I still need to finish that last one.
Yeah. So I was
Run I was
gonna
on.
look into that, but
Cool.
yeah. So he's been big on my list. I rebought Breath of the Wild again because it was on sale at Best
Yes,
Buy.
you did. Yes,
It's like
you
a
did.
cycle with me. It's like $36. I can afford that.
Dude, it's
So-
you like.
I
I honestly think you will love that game. You just need to get to a certain part.
I know. I think I need to push through it. Like, when I first played it, I was amazed by it and just like everything was awesome. And then I got to a certain point where I was like, this is getting kind of boring. So then I just like had too many other things to do and play, and so I sold it. And then I've just never been able to get back into it. So it was on sale again for $45 at Best Buy because they were price matching Walmart, I think.
Nice.
So
My suggestion with that game, especially if you found that your issue getting started was boredom, is like once you get to a point where he kind of tells you like, okay, like you can go to these shrines and get shrine stuff, and then if you get enough, you can get hearts or this or this or this. Or it's like, oh, you can like go and here's like this village and they have, you can like solve this thing, and start picking out major set points to like go do, and then just like don't get lost in the stuff in the immediate view. Go do like a big thing first, and then on your way to the big thing, usually it's like, oh, what's this guy? And then you go talk to him,
Yeah.
and then like, bam, side quest, and,
And
you're
I mean
like,
that's
off and
kind that's
running.
kind of what I was doing because I made it to the first place, or I don't know what order they happen in, but I made it to like the fish people place.
okay, yeah, that's the first
Um,
one I did, I think too.
And
the
basically, I
Zoroark.
stopped playing because I couldn't find the arrows.
Oh,
Because he's like, go get 10 arrows, and it doesn't show me where they are, and I'm like, this is too hard.
it was you're supposed to like climb up this mountain.
Yeah.
and,
So I think my problem was I just didn't want to put a lot of effort into it because I was just getting like bored with the process at the time. So I think I just need to get back into it.
Yeah.
And go with it.
It's a game that doesn't require thought, but it definitely might warrant. I would just Google stuff immediately. Like there's not. I don't want to say there's not like a story like there is, but if you're not super fickle about like things getting like quote unquote spoiled or whatever, like it's just.
I think that
Google
was
it.
the big thing for me that was hard to stay engaged in it because it didn't feel like there was like a huge like story. Like I was just in this open world, but like it wasn't clear what the reason was other than like I was asleep for 100 years or something.
Sure.
But I think I just need to like give more time to the world and like explore and stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, once you start getting armor and finding stuff, and once you
Yeah.
run into your first guardian in the field, and you get your butt kicked, you're like,
Mhm.
all right, I gotta
yeah.
figure this out.
So I'm excited to get back into it. I think I
Dope.
need to give it the time it deserves. So
Yeah,
Yeah, and then the last thing is Diablo 3 for the
Yes,
Switch.
dude.
So
I'm real excited. I'm so happy they actually announced it.
yeah,
So
I thought it was like I thought it was like rumored like last year almost.
Yeah,
and they're
it's
like,
been-
we're not bringing Diablo or
yeah,
something.
it's been.
And I was like, and
and
now
then
they're
lo and behold,
releasing
they're
it. I'm
like,
like,
we're bringing Diablo.
Let's be real.
Let's be
bringing
real.
it.
We're
Yeah.
bringing it down.
So
I see it even more so as so I'm excited because I really dig in Diablo 3. I think it's a pretty fun game. It's more like dungeon crawly. It's kind of that OG like Gauntlet, but with like more depth and like more drops and stuff like that and classes. But what I'm excited for is it means that Blizzard is not opposed to bringing stuff to the Switch. So if they bring Overwatch to the Switch, so help me Moses, I will be.
I'd buy it.
Ooh, dog. Now you're talking.
Now
like
you're talking.
portable Overwatch.
That'd be so fun.
Bro,
Yeah.
oh gosh.
That'd be so fun.
It'd be too much.
Yeah.
It'd be too much. Well, and here's this thing too, like Diablo 3 is going to be running at, what do they say, 60 frames, I thought, 720p
720p
and 960
handheld
docked,
960 docked at 60 frames.
which I mean 960 is what Xbox One is running for some games, you know what I'm saying? So if they can do that with Diablo, I think they could run Overwatch at 720, make it pretty fluid.
Yeah.
So I think there's no excuse. It's just time, and maybe I could see that being their big hesitation right now, is that game would sell stupid fast on the Switch. But I think the biggest thing is probably like, now that it's close to the end of its life cycle, but if you pump in a whole bunch of money and then you don't have cross-play or you don't have cross
that's the thing is
stuff.
Sony keeps being stingy with that cross.
I mean, unless you do it with Xbox, like,
Yeah.
you know, you'd probably boost a lot of those player bases then, because you have a little more breadth of competition, so you're probably getting matches
Yeah.
quicker. Like, I think that's awesome.
Mhm.
So, but
For sure.
I mean, they've done that with Fortnite and other things. Like, I don't see why they couldn't do it with that.
For sure.
But I'm biased. I really want it. Really,
Yeah.
really, really, really bad.
Yeah.
Get with it,
So that
Blizzard.
would be dope. I bet they'll bring other games. Like they'll for sure Hearthstone. I feel like has got to be coming soon
Maybe
because it's
I
like
could see
it's a
it.
tablet-y type game. Like,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't be that hard probably to port it to since
Mhm.
it's already on other tablets and stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised. So
True that.
it's an interesting move though. So hopefully, and they had like a whole video and stuff. So hopefully that shows like goodwill between Nintendo and Blizzard and like they're
Oh, yeah.
kind of forming this relationship. So that's cool. It's cool to see.
100%.
So
You
yeah,
wanna read that email?
yeah, we'll get
From my boy?
get to the meat of the conversation now.
Yeah.
This email's from our boy, ya boy Bus,
Ya boy Bus.
Joshua Bus.
JJ Sippy's Butters Bus. Doctor.
All right, the email reads PCPs. That's what he called us.
Drugs, baby, drugs.
Drugs, baby.
Drugs, baby.
Long-time listener, first-time writer here. You guys are all about creativity, digging into the creative world, and also creating in your own ways. What would you guys say is the primary driver behind your love of all things creative? What role does your faith play in loving creativity? Where did each of you get your creative start? Do you each have a favorite medium of making creative content and a favorite for consuming creative content? That's the gist of it.
Cool.
So
Lot to unpack. Let's see, what was and then favorite for consuming. Cool. And again, it's from our boy Bus. Sorry, we're like, it's a Thursday. It's like rainy outside. We're just like, I was super behind from vacation, like I had to get all those episodes done in like a day. So
it's all good.
listening to like myself talk for 2 hours straight, it's, believe it or not, it's draining. Man, so how to take that first step? So
Start with the primary.
what would
driver.
you guys say is the primary driver behind creativity? So I think I'm going to put my discussion on creativity specifically in the context, and probably for both of us is in the context of like art specifically, I would say, or things that would be considered more artistic. I'm of the belief that like everything to a degree is creativity. Everything requires your brain to process through things that don't exist or come up with problems and solutions. Like all that is creativity, but I think specifically like art stuff that you like, I drew a picture for
Things
my
that are more
creativity.
abstract, maybe.
Right, yeah,
'Cause,
or
a
like
business startup is
exactly,
creative,
like exactly.
but I think he's specifically talking about like writing stories or making videos
Exactly.
or like that kind of
Definitely.
creativity. So
Yeah, so I think for me, the funny thing is like when I got his email, I was running back through just like childhood and stuff like that, and there's a couple notable moments that I remember just like doing creative stuff. So Zach and I always used to come up with these like imaginary games. So like we didn't have game consoles until we were like a little bit older, but all the time we would like make characters and names, and we'd have like weapons and powers, and we'd like fight imaginary guys and like run around the backyard when we were little and stuff like that. And as we got older, it was like watching cartoons, and I remember one of the first ones that we really got into was like Digimon. So I think there's always a draw to these things that that like didn't, I don't want to say didn't exist, because that's not what I mean, but they weren't grounded in the real world in a sense. And I think there was a draw to like, oh, like this is cool, like someone made this, like this is a cool thing, but it never dawns on you in that, I'd say for a long time, that like really how much goes into like making stuff, and that someone did make that, and that you could do that too.
Yeah.
So I think there was always a fascination with like just seeing the stuff that I was consuming at the time, and like listening to music. And I loved music. Like my dad would take me in the basement, and we'd like, you know, we had this like mini basketball hoop that we'd like shoot hoops on, and so he'd like put on his old CDs from like the 80s and stuff while we were like shooting.
That
and so then I got into the whole thing. Oh, dude. And I mean, like I remember like there'd be times where like certain songs would come on, or he would take me, and I used to make and this is funny, because this is like, I feel old saying this, but I'm sure like any older person above me would be like really mad at me saying I feel old. But I remember him working with me to pick out CDs from his giant collection and like make mix CDs for me, and we would like compile the CDs. And so I remember like going through albums and being like, oh yeah, that one, like, oh, I like that one. And then I would just make these CDs, and I just listen to this like random conglomeration of these 20 tracks that I compiled, and just replay it over and over and over, just because I love the sound.
Back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day, playing basketball in the basement and mix CDs.
Nice.
So
That's cool.
yeah, so I think there was always and like I would say like my dad's an engineer, ironically enough, but he's always been very creative, like was very musical growing up. My mom is a teacher, but she's also had a lot of like creative stuff, and used to do like craft things with us. Like when she was home in the summers, like she'd be like, we're not going to play game, we're not playing games or doing this, like we have like the craft bin, go make something from the craft bin. And Zach and I of course are like, no, like I want to play video games. And then so then we like whip some stuff out of this bin, and it's like, all right, make something. And we're like, well, I'm gonna make this guy. And then like you just like make stuff. And so I think it was like little things like that. And it's funny, like as I got older too, it just matured. I remember asking one birthday for like 20 composition notebooks, because I was so convinced that I was going to write books in every single one of them. And I had like characters I was going to come up with. I was going to like make my own superheroes and stuff. And I remember starting a couple of them, and maybe like writing like 2 pages. I was in like 5th or 6th grade, I think. So it wasn't ever like anything that would happen, but just like there was something that was like, oh, that would be so fun to like write my own character. Or I remember on like rainy days, like usually it was when we were grounded from playing video games, we found a way to do this. But you know, like writing a comic, like I wrote a comic once about like these anthropomorphic, poorly drawn like cat and dog who like fought crime and and stuff, and just like weird things like that. But I don't know, it's just things that there was just always a draw to like making something that didn't exist, or like seeing something that I liked that someone else made and being like, I think I could do that, but I think this is how I want to see it. Like I want to see it look like this, and then just trying to do it. And then that just again later in high school and stuff evolved into like making videos, and I was the one who did all our class projects for video projects in high school. So I was that one kid who everyone's like, well, Josh knows how to use iMovie, so maybe we should get him in our group. So just joking, but yeah. And then I mean college, like Sugar Rush, which if you haven't, I would love to go back and reshoot that whole video, because it was like the most run and gun video I've ever made, but probably one of the most fun.
That was like before
video
you
projects.
were like serious about
Yes,
doing
I was
video
still
stuff too.
I was still in engineering. But which will come into play later in the questions. But yeah, so we made this movie Sugar Rush for this film contest, which we won first place, which is awesome. And it's still on YouTube. and it was like this whole horrible premise of like basically using sugar as a supplement for drugs and basically like spoofing a drug run movie. And yeah, it was a good time, but it was just weird. Like, but again, it was just one of those things of like, we needed someone to do it. I loved doing those things, and I was like, yeah, heck yeah, I'll do that. So, yeah, I think
so
just
funny.
seeing something come out of nowhere, that I look at and can say like, wow, like I made that, like that came from my hands, or like that came from my hands, and no one else has made anything like it. Which I think is a catch-22 as an artist as well, because then you kind of can get that very nerve-wracking headspace of you don't want to be a copy of another artist or just be, you know, a subpar ripoff. But side notes, side tangents. But anyway, I'm curious because you have the music background, and I know you've played like bands in high school and used to do stuff, but like, did you ever do like drawing or writing or other things before that, or was it always kind of a draw to music?
Oh yeah, I mean, growing up, I was never into music or stuff like that. I think growing up, me and my brother Austin, like, we drew everything under the sun. Like, I remember I used to collect Garfield stuff, and I would always draw like Garfield and all of his different friends and stuff, and we'd watch Dragon Ball Z, and we'd like come up with our own Dragon Ball Z characters, or we'd draw Goku Super Saiyan 20 or something, and we just like have all these like super jacked like ripped Dragon Balls, and we'd awesome. Like create our own characters, or like we'd go see the next new superhero movie, because back in the day, like, we loved X-Men and Spider-Man, and then like when the Batman movies first came out, like, we were drawing Batman and creating our own superheroes, and like we had like, I think like we moved a couple times during like high school, and like I dug up like, I think I threw some of them away. I shouldn't have done that, but I was in a mode of non-sentimentality, and I was just like, get rid of everything. But I remember finding like 3 or 4 just like thick like Rembrandt sketchbooks full of like just pictures that we had drawn and stuff. So yeah, when we were kids, like, we loved drawing, and I think like I got to, if I'm being honest, I feel like Call of Duty like destroyed my creative self for a while. I think like getting into the online gaming world kind of like stifled that part of me, because I stopped writing and drawing. But like, we used to write stories all the time. Like, I remember finding a story about like our mom's cat, like, just like chronicling her adventures around the house, and like we just like wrote all these dumb goofy stories, and we always had like dreams of writing books and stuff like that. So I think it's very similar to yours. But I think high school is when I got into music, and trying to think, like, I didn't play any instruments, and like I got mildly interested in singing just from playing Rock Band. Like, it was always fun singing and playing Rock Band. And then senior year I joined choir, and so I got into it then, and then I was in the band with the high school guys, which, I mean, was kind of trash, but it was a fun time. We had like a benefit show at the high school for like the band, and people could pay, and there's like 5 or 6 bands, I think, and we were one of the bands, and there was a couple like local metal screamo bands there too, and it drew a pretty big crowd, mostly family and friends and stuff. But like, there were like, I remember when we played, like, being on the stage, it was like, dude, this is the life, like, this is awesome. And it was just like a dumb little high school show, but like, it was kind of just like this moment of like, I wish I could do this sort of thing. And back then I wasn't even that serious about it. Like, I didn't know how to play guitar yet. And then during college, I learned how to play acoustic guitar, taught myself how to play, and then basically just started writing songs and playing from there. I was big into the, like, I don't know what you'd call it, like, basically Warped Tour scene type music for a long time. And so, like, I liked playing acoustic versions of songs and stuff. So I think that's where a lot of my creative drive comes from.
Sure.
And I think what I've been realizing lately is the reason I like music and song, and a lot of the songs that I am drawn to, is usually like storytelling, and like, because a lot of pop punk, even, like, it's angsty, but a lot of it is just like storytelling through like an angsty point of view, versus like folk music has always been a similar angst point of view, but it's like a social angst versus like just pure like I hate my parents sort of angst. So like I'm drawn to different things, and And so I've been getting into like different folk things and hip hop and like some country music and stuff where like it's about the storytelling. And I think I'm realizing now that what I'm really interested in is writing stories and kind of like taking it back to what I was interested in my childhood. And I think I got lost along the way somewhere. So that's kind of where I'm at now, is realizing like it's stories and drawing and stuff that I'm interested in. And music was a way of doing that. But I think I'm more interested in just like the stories. So
No, that's super interesting, because I think to kind of nuance, I know I've like jokingly griped and seriously griped about like pop music and stuff in the past, and even just like some of the more mainstream like movies and things that people tend to watch. And I think I get so like more or less like legitimately angry about them isn't because it's like, well, I don't like it and I don't want those things to exist, but there are just such deeper, more rich things that exist out there that are just so much more worth people's time and attention.
Yeah.
Like just to,
I think in the past couple of years, I've found it like, that's why I was fascinated in this question, because I find it very hard to explain to a lot of people like what the actual drive to create is. Because like we could tell stories about our childhoods and different things, but like why are some people drawn to doing these kinds of things, and why do some people look at like entertainment and stuff and see art, and why do some people say like why are you overanalyzing this, or why are you doing this?
Yeah.
Because I know I have conversations with people like that where it's like you just can't talk about, like, you can't analyze movies with them because it's just like they're just enjoying it as like entertainment. Whereas for me, it's hard to watch a movie and not like try and discern what the artist or what the director was intending, even if it's like some dumb movie. Like, I don't know, I feel like there's always something like behind everything there's like something, I feel like.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain that mindset to somebody who's just like, I don't think like that.
Well, and that's what's so interesting is like, I think staying on that media, that, you know, the thought of just like certain media that just kind of like those messages that push forward that you hear and you're like reading between the lines and you're like, why is anyone wasting their time on this? Like that, you know, that's like pop music. It's like, yeah, they're all saying something, they're alluding to things, but it's like, it's shallow and it's unimportant, and it's like, just get smashed, just have tons of fun, like just bang whoever you want, just do as many drugs as you can, like just like, and that's the message. Whereas like there are other songs where it's like, well, how can you listen to metal? It's just so angry, but it's like there's a rawness and an actuality to how these people are feeling and the things that they've experienced that like you maybe don't agree with, but you can at least listen and be like, man, I wouldn't have that reaction, but like I can imagine someone being this angry about fans treating them this way, or a certain institution treating them this way, or a loved one, or losing a loved one, or whatever, just grappling with like really deep questions. And so, and I think I'm in the same camp, and I wonder if to not give an answer, but just I've thought the same thing of like and I've actually seen people that normally like my mom, for one, like she never used to be into like analyzing things or like picking up on things, but since she started watching more movies and more of the stuff that Zach and I are watching and reading, and she like started reading Neon Genesis Evangelion, the manga, and she's like loved it. Yeah, which is so funny because like she's just not in a way against her, but she's just like, she's not the person you'd pin as like, oh, I'm just gonna read Neon Genesis Evangelion, this like really dense, highly popular manga. But seeing her or like my dad just like grow in like loving to just kind of see the deeper sides of stuff. And I think what I kind of chalk it up to is that entertainment, in a weird way, it's like, okay, there's a movie, and there are some people, I think there are a lot of people who either fall into the art or the entertainment side. And I think both have a hard time almost grappling with the other side. And I think it's better to be in the middle, where it's like, I understand that this movie was made to like entertain me to the respect that like I didn't need to spend $10 and sit in front of a giant screen and watch a bunch of fake people pretend to be spies and like shoot stuff. But I also don't think that we should be like so lofty that like every single thing that has ever been created needs to be like analyzed to its last detail and blah 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 and all that stuff. But I think it's funny because I think the entertainment people don't want to grapple with the art side and like the deeper meaning because it's to entertain. There is no purpose. I watched it because I was bored on Friday night and I just needed to put something on.
Which is valid because
100%.
At the end of the day, like a lot of pretty much all of these things is like that's why they're successful is because of the people who are just seeking to be entertained.
Right.
Like the people who are seeking for some deeper meaning are like probably a fraction of the budget that these people are seeking.
Exactly. And I think on the art side too, it's like the art side I think is so obsessed with finding out and paying attention to details and I think it's interesting because I found that a less narcissistic, less like mean-spirited fellow artist is much more likely to be appreciative of your work, or at least work with you to make it better objectively than someone who seeks it just for entertainment, or like thinks they kind of know like an art how to analyze art, but they don't make it, if that makes sense. Like an artist is not someone who studies art. Like an artist is someone who makes art. And so I've had a lot of fun. I kind of had both experiences in college where there were a lot of people I worked with where it's like, you don't write fiction, but like you're reading this book and reading between the lines and you're like adding all these things that like don't make sense. And it's like, oh, but you're the professor, so like, you know better. It's like, yeah, sure, but at the end of the day, like I also have written stuff, so maybe we like other people in this class who are whatever. But I think it's really interesting that like, I think to your question as you posed as we were kind of walking in of like one of them of just being like, what is the point of creativity in a way? Because it's a deeply it could, I mean, like most things, it could be an intense point of intellectual freak out in a way. Well, yeah, or existential freak out.
I have moments like that where like there's a certain part of me that like, I think we're like getting to the core of the questions he's asking. Yeah. But like, there's a certain part of me, and I've heard this artists like songwriters talk about in interviews, of like, there's just a certain part of you that like has to do something, like has to write songs or has to write or whatever. And if you don't do that, you just feel off or like something feels wrong. But at the same time, there's another part of me that asks, well, what is the purpose? Like, who cares if I write 6 songs and release it to the world? Like, why does that even matter in the first place? Or like, why does it even matter that I write a story down? Like, if I don't do it, maybe it has the same effect if I do it. And so like, it's almost like this weird balance between like the fact that you have to do it and the fact that you like don't see the purpose all the time. Like, it's just just writing a story. It's just writing a song.
Yeah, definitely.
But for some reason, to me, it isn't just writing a story. It isn't just writing a song. It's like me like hashing out my being or my reality or whatever you want to say, and not in like the strict sense of like I'm writing the story about myself, but more so like in creating, I'm like almost like figuring out myself because I don't always understand my own thoughts.
Yeah, for sure.
And so like creating songs and creating stories is a way of like hashing out the ideas that I can't make sense of just in a normal conversation.
No, so. I dig that. I think for me, I totally vibe with that of like, it's kind of a, it's a form in some ways to me. I think it's more when I write like essays or like lyrics and stuff for like poems or songs or whatever. It's almost those are specifically forms of externally processing that kind of produce something, where it's not necessarily that it's like, this is wholeheartedly 100% what I think and believe, but it just is like, in writing it, you're not just saying like, I mean, some artists do this, but you're not just like, well, I'm mad because the government's unfair and everyone cheats everyone out of money and blah, blah, blah. It's like you're thinking of like a nuance and you're like wrestling with like it's like we need order, but like what happens when the order is corrupt? Like we need people who work hard, but what happens when they work so hard that they steal? And like it's just your way of wrestling with like really deep stuff, and you have to naturally condense it into something. And I think then also it comes with I think what I think makes creativity so special to me personally. Like I love talking with people about it because it's just endless conversation. Yep. But I think like in its nature, creativity is. I've said this on I think our creative podcast when we were just kind of talking, because I think we had a little bit of a discussion, but I think it was more about like what we were doing recently and things like that. But I think creativity is like one of the things that God has gifted us as human beings to experience. And it's actually like my story of like doing creativity or pursuing a creative job professionally was actually like at the hands of like a really horrid trial, at least at the time. I kind of laugh at it now because it's like I just can't envision it, and it's just what I needed. But when I started college, I was chasing money and an engineering degree because it was like, I'm going to Madison. I got in because I applied to be an engineer. I think I can do a good job. I was doing really well in all these math and science courses in school. It's going to be great. Did really well first semester. Got 2 Ds out of my 3 classes my second semester, and I was like, what on earth? Like, this isn't what I was supposed to do, but I thought this was going to be like it. I thought this was going to be the thing that provided, like, I was going to be this engineer and I was going to make all this money and pay off debts faster. It just, all this stuff chirping of, be a STEM student, be all this stuff. And, and so I just never thought of it. And it wasn't until the following semester I took a writing class, and I actually was like writing, like it was like it wasn't an English class. It was like an actual writing class. And we had to like write more narrative stuff or like argue things, but it wasn't like, a thesis paper or things like that. It was actually like taking a real world issue and then arguing through it or whatever. And I just remember like there was just something that like clicked, which ironically was happening as there was that clicking of like, there's something in stories and creativity that it just sits with me. I don't know what it is. At that same time, I was in a econ class because I was trying to jump to another major that I thought would make me a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And I literally failed. That was like the one class I failed in college. But I was just falling in love with like writing and storytelling and just like communicating. But not just verbally, like actually taking something that I had lived and experienced and like bringing someone through it in a written way that they could feel it tangibly, or that they would feel uncomfortable, that they would feel the triumph at the end, or that they would feel the different points where it's like, this is kind of hard to read, or like, this is intense, or like, wow, like that's such a cool ending or whatever. And so it's funny because like that was when it started happening, but it wasn't until the end of the semester when I finally was like, all right, I need to change majors. But I got this horrible news that I had been kicked out of UW because I had gone on probation because of the previous semester's debacle, and then I failed this one class, so it dropped me before all this university rigmarole. It's a bunch of bullcrap. No, I just flat out failed the class, and so I got removed from the university, and I feel like at the time it was like the biggest blow to me. But it was, and I think like this is why, like for me and my personal story of like my faith and like why it's tangible to me is I remember sitting at home and being like, I know I need to write. Like, I know I need to do something creative. Like, I was in the most probably depressed state of my life ever, of just like, I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to sleep because I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to get back into the college or not. And I've made all these friends and I've done all this stuff, built all these relationships. And I feel like for the first time in being in college in a year and a half, I've like figured out what I want to do and I'm ready to pursue it wholeheartedly. And I got back in and I pursued it, and I just fell in love. Like everything it just clicked. Like all of a sudden there was this thing where it was like, it just made sense to think out of the box and to not be constrained to formulas and stuff like that. And so I think, hearkening back to the start of our convo, just like remembering being a little kid and like doing all this stuff and like making our own games and making our own characters and things like that. It's like, I didn't have to adhere to anything. It was like whatever I could think of, that was the limit. And, and obviously as you mature, there's like rules that come involved of just best practice and all that good stuff. But man, for the first time, it was like I feel like me personally as a human being was designed to be an artist. Like it just like it felt like I got so much joy out of just like making things and like creating art. And it's funny. So like Attack on Titan was actually the show that I note is like the point where I feel like God has a really funny sense of humor. So I remember sitting in the library about to meet with a TA my second semester. So the semester I got back in, so I got readmitted to the university. That basically were like, yep, you clear all this stuff. Like it's as if it never happened. Just make sure you don't fail again. And so I got back in and I was waiting to meet with a TA, and Zach had been harping on me to watch Attack on Titan. And I was like, all right, fine. So I got like 4 episodes in and I was like, okay, this is pretty good. Like I dig it. And I remember feeling in the show, like I had never watched a show that made me feel physically sick. Like you could just like tangibly feel how depressed and hopeless everyone was. And just everything you were watching, like the carnage of these people losing their loved ones and their home being destroyed, and the rich kicking them out to be eaten because they don't want to deal with you. And like, it was just like, frick, like I have never seen anything like this. And so there's a major point in the story where all of a sudden there's this major thing that happens, and I remember just like my heart sinking, and then the credits rolling, and I was like, you can't freaking do this to me, man. Like I'm just about to go meet with this professor or whatever, and all of a sudden it was like a light bulb went off. It was like someone formulated this entire world and all these people and all this stuff, and like they are making you feel this right now with this entire creation, with the team and the animation and the stories and the music and the drawings and everything going into this thing has been created to make you feel what you're feeling right now. And it was just like that surreal, like, I want to do that to people. Like I want to mess people up like that. Like I want to make people just react. And and it's just I think ever since then, that I think has been something that has just evolved and grown, of like why I love creativity is like getting to make, especially doing some freelance stuff now, as just getting to like make something for someone that they couldn't make themselves, and just to be like elated. Like I couldn't have done this, but you have no idea what this video for our project is going to do. Like, or like I'm so thankful because we would have had to spend X amount of money to do this thing, but because you were willing to do it and make it look great, like it looks great, and it was this, and so like we don't have to whatever. And so I think yeah, it just like evolved into wanting to, it just, I don't know, just being able to like give and just let people experience stuff. And so I think creativity is like such an experience as the creator, but also as the person that you're sharing it with. And so I think for me, like that's why I love writing stories. And part of it is to just see like what happens with this world that I'm creating, and like what do people think of it, and what are they going to experience out of it and get out of it. But I could ramble forever. So, but I'm curious, like, from you too, because I know it's been fun. So you and I first met my freshman year at UW.
Yep.
And I remember like all our swings of like the ridiculous stuff we tried to do and like wanted to do. And so I'm wondering, like, for you, I've noticed how you have been evolving into like wanting to branch out and do things that you haven't like quote unquote like done yet or pursued yet. So I'm curious like where that mindset comes from.
I think a lot of it has spawned from I don't want to say I've had a similar experience to you in college, but I had a similar trajectory of like I came into college not knowing what I wanted to do, and like hating English, hating writing, hating all this stuff because high school just made it trite and boring and dumb. And I liked math. I liked order and rigidity and things that made sense because you just solve the problem and it's done, whatever. And then I got to college and took calculus and realized that I despised math. And I took this speech writing class where like I thought I was going to hate it. And like all of a sudden I realized like I can make an argument. I can write a thing and persuade people to come to my side.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I can do it well. And I was like, what the heck is going on? Like I hate writing. And so like that kind of like shifted my mindset of like preferring writing my ideas and expressing my opinions and thoughts and ideas through just writing in general. And then similarly, I was a psychology major for a while because I didn't know what I want to do, and that's just what everybody does when they don't know what they want to do.
Or an engineer.
Yes, that
same boat.
too.
Either way.
And I just hated it. Like I just remember having so many moments where I just like hated the major, hated my classes, began like hating myself, and it was just like, this sucks. Like I remember talking to my dad and Evan and stuff, and just like, I don't like this at all, and it made me really bitter towards college for a really long time. And I just remember the moment when I decided, like, I'm done. I'm quitting psychology and I'm just doing religious studies, because that was just like the thing that I could still get done in 4 years and the thing that interested me. And as soon as that happened, as soon as I chose to do religious studies, like it was this huge weight lifted off my shoulder, like this huge burden lifted off. And I think the thing that I appreciated about religious studies was the examining of ideas and stories, and because a lot of religion is storytelling and different narratives through stories, and basically every class was always writing. You have to write 10-page paper, you have to read a book and write a paper about it, and like I loved doing that stuff because like it's not a multiple choice test where you don't get to argue your point. Like I get to write an essay, and if I argue my point well enough, I'll do good in the class. And so like it was kind of this process of learning that I actually do enjoy arguing my point. I enjoy talking and arguing and doing all this stuff, which is why we're here doing podcasts now. But yeah, I think it goes through to that. And I think like, to be honest, like meeting you and like just kind of like always having that conversation of like, we should do something. And it's kind of just like, it would always fail or whatever.
Or we'd like quit after a week.
Yeah,
for sure.
And then we started the Are You Mad podcast or whatever.
Yep. Yeah.
And I think like starting that and then actually completing something, actually like doing something felt so good to me. It was like, it might not be good, it might not be like high quality, but like we actually set our minds out and we finished something, even if it's just us talking. Like we finished it and we put it out there and people listened to it. And so it's been interesting for me and a learning process in the art of creativity, in like every step we've taken towards getting to the point we're at now with the podcast specifically, like has been a process of like every step of the way asking like, well, what are we doing right, and how can we shift it to make it better, and how can we do this, and like there's very distinct moments where we've turned and shifted and changed the way we talk and do content and stuff, and it's all basically just a refining process of seeing like what are we actually meant to be doing. Because I think that's a lot of the time with like what I'm finding with like writing stories and coming up with ideas is like you don't know what you're meant to be doing with that story until you actually like start doing it and start writing and start crafting it, and then you finally realize like I'm not writing what I actually want to write, or I'm not doing or creating what I actually want to create. And then you get into it and you're like, okay, how can I shift and mold this? And I think that's kind of where I'm at now with this, is like, because we've been meeting on Saturdays, at least not for the summer, but before that we had been meeting on Saturdays. And I think like the biggest thing that I've been learning with creativity, that is the hardest thing for me to do, is to not be lazy. I think like as much like whenever I am writing, whenever I am creating, it feels so good. It feels right. It feels like I just want to talk about it all the time. Like Evan and I go on a walk and I just like tell her all about this stuff and like whatever. But like for some reason, I just don't do it. I don't create. I don't sit down and write. I don't like, because it requires discipline. And I think like for me, that's the hardest part of like getting things done that I've realized, is like creativity isn't all just like flowers and rainbows, like getting to create and do whatever you want. It's also like not being lazy, getting down every day and writing what you want to write, and like pushing through the hard parts to get to the parts that mean something to you. And I think that's kind of where I'm at now, of like learning how to be creative and like actually produce stuff. Because I could sit here and say that I'm a creative person, but that means nothing if I've never like actually like created something tangible, or like if I don't continue to do things that I say are meaningful to me.
For sure.
And so that's kind of where I'm at now with that. So
no, that's awesome. Yeah, I think one, it's probably one of my favorite moments in life when you and I got to work on all that stuff and all the things that we've quit and all the things that we've tried like 3 or 4 times and like all the rap albums we said we were gonna write and like
sour cream,
like a bowl of sour cream. Like, dude, just so many funny moments. But I think like you're super right, and I think I don't know, like I think it's been funny. Like we talk a lot of, you and I talk a lot about existential stuff, and I know like even doing this pod, like we have friends who are like very generous with their time and like listen to it and like joke around with us about it. But I think there's just like something in us that just, even if it's like our 10 friends and it's just our inside joke that like we meet every week and, you know, like talk about video games and like rant and make stupid jokes about whatever, that it's just like, this is just like what we were supposed to do. And it just clicked, and it feels right. And it's a very weird feeling doing something like that and having like nothing come of it. And I think that's the weird thing that makes creatives unnatural to a lot of the main parts of life that they don't fit in with, is like a creative person is the majority are perfectly satisfied just like sitting, making a song and it like never going viral, never going whatever. It's just like, I wrote this, or like my friend heard this, or like I played this for this. And, you know, like one of my favorite stories I've ever written was the one I used to propose to Gloria. And it's like, no one's ever going to, like, the massive world's never going to read that. Like, she's the only one who's ever experienced that. But, like, that was specifically, like, that one was so important and was such a big thing. There's just so much value in just, like, but even if people never see it or hear it. And I think in a weird way, like, that's one of the things that the past couple of years I've been really challenged with is, do I want to write these things and do I want to make these things or draw these things or create these things because I want to be somebody, or am I doing it because I need to do it? I want to see it. And I think that's been a hard transition, because I think the immature modern age of like YouTube and Instagram fame and artist fame and all this stuff, where I feel like we're in a really hard spot where like artists can get famous real fast, real quick. And I think there's a pressure that comes with that. And I think we've lost the art, as ironically, like we as creatives have lost the art of just making to satisfy ourselves in a way. And not being okay with just like making things. And
I mean, a lot of big creators, like anytime anybody asks them like, why do you write the things you write, or how do you come up with ideas? It's always like, one, that's a stupid question. Two, like, I just write what I'm interested in. Yeah. And like, it's hard to sometimes think from that mindset, because on one hand, you want to write what other people are going to be interested in because you want people to actually read your stuff. But the core thing that people are always saying is like, if you don't write something that you're passionate about, if you don't write something that you would read yourself, then it's just not going to be good. Yeah, it's like, definitely. People aren't going to like it if you don't like it. So yeah, but that's the hard balance of like doing it for yourself, but also doing it for what somebody else, and like figuring out like to what extent do you do that.
Definitely. Yeah, I've heard the author Ted Decker explain it this way of his process. And I think I jive a lot with what he describes, which is basically that for him, writing is almost like, kind of like what I was saying earlier, it's almost like processing for him. And for him, writing stories and writing novels is how he thinks through like really deep things. And it's just how he himself makes sense of like the stuff that happens and goes on, and even challenges certain things that are happening or going on. And so I think like that's a responsibility that I think is another thing being lost by artists is, I think it's funny, like the prophets in the Old Testament were regarded as like artists in a way, like they were like the speakers and they were the orators. And so that's why a lot of the language that they use is like poetic, very poetic. And so I think in a way, like artists are God's messengers in some senses, and, you know, not the Keshas and the, Miley Cyruses of the world, but there are people where I think of even like, in a way, like, even someone who isn't from a Christian background, like I think of, Right in Two by Tool, like the language in that song and the poetry in that song and the message that it's grappling with from, a secular perspective with regards to religion is fascinating. And I think as a religious person, it's important to think about the things that he's saying, and it's important to think about like what is like Maynard trying to convey in these lyrics. And and I think there's a huge part of like artists being messengers to each other and also to the culture. And I think it's a huge responsibility. And I think like that's why I get really impassioned and really ornery sometimes about stuff, is because people need to take it seriously. Because art is one of those things that, because you know, some people are amazing at it, they are really respected and they have a lot of sway with what they make and what they say. And so when you're the biggest person on the stage and you're saying get high, get stoned, get whatever, and doing all these things, like I just think that's a disservice to.
It reminds me of, I remember seeing I think it was Loudwire or something, like Corey Taylor interview, and they like asked him about pop music or something. And
I think I've seen that interview. I don't remember what he said.
He was like, I don't hate pop music, but in some ways, like, I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was just like, it's kind of offensive to people who like grind and work their whole life to make music that's meaningful to them and stuff. And you can just get up on this stage and basically like sing about nonsense and make millions of dollars. And it's kind of like, it's offensive to people who are like working hard to actually like create meaningful stuff.
Definitely.
And that's, I mean, it's hard talking about stuff like this because like maybe those pop songs are meaningful to somebody. Like I don't ever want to like say like this is creativity and this is creativity, because I think it does take a certain, to the people behind the scenes writing the music and writing the songs, like it takes a very certain amount of having your finger on the pulse of American culture to be able to write a hit song and say like this is what the people want to listen to. And that in itself is creative, I think. Yeah. But in some ways, the entertainment aspect of it is like where I start to shy away from it. Of like, it's like you said, it's shallow and it's offensive in some ways to people who are like working hard for nothing to try and create.
Yeah, so. And I think it's funny too, because I feel like in the same way, it's the entertainment versus the art. Yeah. You know, there's some people who are so heavily ingrained in the art camp that they can't see that. Like I love 80s music, and the majority of the 80s songs that I love are just superfluous nonsense. Like they are. Yeah. But they're catchy and they're good and they're fun to listen to. And so I totally understand that aspect of the entertainment. But I think like what always concerns me, even with some of the stuff that's put forward in like the music that I love in like 80s and even in the metal community too, is like art is taken very seriously by a lot, even subconsciously, to the point where it does influence what people do and what they think and how they act. And I think that's why, like, one of the other reasons to answer Bus's question of why I love creativity is like, especially with things like music, where there's words involved, there's music involved, there's planning with like the written word. You don't have to just like speak it. It's not like a conversation where you and I have to kind of think off the fly and rely on our reflexes and our intuition of like, well, what should I say next? How do I progress and things like that? Like the written word, you can sit and you can plan and you can write and you can rewrite and you can chop and you can cut, and like there is a molding that goes on when you're doing that stuff that's intense. And so I think as a result, like those things are really powerful, but I don't know, man. Like I think that's one of my biggest drives of personally for like wanting to like get stuff out there and make stuff, is I really hurt for a lot of the people growing, like especially the younger generation, like growing up. And I feel like when we were younger, it was before, I mean, like MTV and stuff were things, like there was still TMZ and like all that crap, but I feel like especially with YouTube and internet and Instagram and Twitter and social media, like having these megastars that their whole message is like get rich, have fun, do all this stuff, it's such a more palatable thing to hear. And I think it drowns out a lot of people who are trying to point to issues and who are trying to wrestle with things through music. And I think, I don't know, I feel like our culture is like movies. Like I miss movies that were like that were metaphorical in a way, but were like challenging, that like challenge stuff. I miss more music. And granted, I mean, like we're more in the like metal or other genre. We're more into genres that tend to challenge stuff. But I think of like, a song like Black Honey by Thrice. That's about like the oil industry and like, politics and stuff like that, or just some of the other songs that Five Finger has written about, like mental health and the veteran crisis and stuff like that. It's just such a powerful tool, and I think I don't know. I really like strongly desire making things that impact people in a way that isn't just like, oh, that was fun to watch, or like that was entertaining. It's like what value can I give to someone? But this is my last point, and I know you and I could just ramble on forever, and I feel like we answered.
I think so.
I think favorite medium, we've kind of talked around.
That's
it.
basically
like,
the whole podcast.
Yeah. Just like movies and games and music.
I think my
writing.
new favorite is comics.
Yeah.
I think
sure.
I want to write a comic. So
I just remembered this quote. I've been watching a couple interviews with the late David Foster Wallace, and
I saw he was like all in your
yeah.
Like, you must have been watching.
Yeah. So he had a really interesting interview where he was talking about like his progression from being a student to a professor, and how when he was young he was like, well, like I just write the stuff that like they just don't understand. If they don't like it, it's because they don't get it. And then when he became a professor, he's like, oh, like I was just too conceited to see there were a lot of people who had really good things to say. And I think I've been realizing that a lot about creativity and especially too. So like piggybacking off this, what we were just talking about, like creativity being a really important tool, and saying things that are meaningful. Like one of the things that he points to is like bad writing or things that just aren't good are things that are like, I'm trying to show you how creative I am, or like I'm showing you how sophisticated or how intelligent or sneaky or what, like you're trying to basically, this is my projection of whatever I'm making, that's my projection of like how good I am at something, you know, like someone who puts a bunch of special effects in a movie that only needs like one or none. Yeah. And so I think that's really resonated with me of like, our job as creatives is to make stuff, and to make stuff that says something meaningful. And I think, obviously that varies depending on the message and the medium and stuff like that. But
yeah,
I always try to pursue incorporating some kind of depth into that. And so I love his perspective of like, our job our job is not to be so into ourselves that we create things to show off ourselves. It's to wrestle with things and to, in a way, like show off our flaws. And so anyway, I need to stop because otherwise we'll go on for another hour. But any last thoughts? Any closing?
I don't think so. I think that's the gist. That's the gist of it. I mean, we could go on forever. So
definitely cool. Well, we'll wrap up then. Bus, thanks for the email.
Yeah, thank you. It's good questions.
Yeah, definitely very challenging. Yeah. I don't know if we ever answered. I think I did a little bit with the faith side. I always like to make clear that like that is the biggest drive for me with creativity. Is I do think that like we as human beings we are the only, like, animals build hills and homes and stuff like that, but like we're the only creatures who can take like a spoon and then like find some reason to draw it as like not a spoon,
yeah.
you know,
like grappling
or like
with
whatever
abstract ideas.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think like that is a huge privilege as beings made in God's image that we get to experience. And I think it's super cool that we get to like draw stuff and write stuff and read stuff and watch stuff, and not only like make stuff ourselves, but like get to experience what other people make too and find the value in it and things like that. But
yeah, I think similarly for me, like creativity is almost a way of like hashing out. It's almost like my life is a creative project of God's. And so like by me creating, I'm imitating him creating. And so like through my creativity, I'm hashing out my own experience or my own existence or my own whatever you want to call it, like through the things that I create. And like I said before, like that doesn't mean the things I create are about me.
Definitely.
But like through the act of creating, you're like understanding and whatever. And so I think for me, that's a big part of it. So
awesome. Cool. Bus, thanks again for the good topic.
Yeah.
You can catch our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. We've got some merch and stuff on Redbubble. If there's any designs that you would like to see, let me know. I got you covered. I'll make you something. I'm going to try and see if I can drop the prices, or maybe we just need to do like a t-shirt version of our sticker thing. I don't know. We'll see. No one lets me know these things, so I got to hear from people, folks. I hear you out there. I see you.
How much does a shirt cost on there? Like $25?
I think it's like $20 after 20. I think it's like 25 after shipping.
Okay.
So, which if I have checked, if you go to any other creator like H3H3 or Ninja or whatever, y'all got it.
I mean,
We the
that's
same.
pretty standard.
Yeah,
for
it's pretty standard.
a
If I could
shirt,
do it
unless
any
you're
cheaper,
like large scale
yeah.
and ordering like 10,000 shirts.
Yep.
It's just like at
Yeah.
our range, it's not feasible. So
Between 2 dudes, 3 dudes, I guess.
Yeah.
4 dudes, I guess. Handful of guys. Anyway, you can check out our stuff on redbubble.com. Our Twitter handles are C. Sam Pellegrino, I am Phil Sorensen, Six Wing Creative, and Chris of the Vast is Chris Raj, Master Tilt. And you can check out our podcast Twitter, which will have, going forward, the feeds for the episodes going up there so you'll know when our episodes are live. And that's the gist. And that is Pop Culture Punks is the Twitter handle. And then you can also email us just like Busco and Mark and some of our other friends have at popculturepunks@gmail.com. So feel free to send us anything you'd like us to talk about. We love chit-chatting. We'll really dive into anything. I have no qualms.
yeah,
Maybe certain things. We vet.
we tend to stay away from socio-political issues.
And
Sure,
and
raunchy
that.
too. Yeah.
Right. I was like, I went one way, you went the other. We don't want to talk about the current raunchy stuff. We don't talk
Keep
about.
it posy, baby.
Keep it posy, baby. That is it. And with that, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you guys taking a listen. Hope you enjoyed. Catch you on the flippity flip. Fond cowabunga given.
I'm fat.
Voices in my heart tell me to throw it all away, to toss it in the wind and forget yesterday. But the crowd comes singing back with that same old song. You've got bills you gotta pay. What about job security? But I've been dreaming about packing it all up, 'cause the war in me just won't relent till there's nothing left but dust. So what do you do when the walls start closing in and everyone you love tells you it's all just in your head?